The hospice nurse found it tucked beneath a pillow, a single folded piece of paper, edges off from being handled so many times, filled with a child's careful, deliberate handwriting, as if each word had been chosen with the weight of a lifetime. The girl who wrote it was 7 years old. Her name was Amara, and she had been unconscious for 6 hours by the time it was discovered. The doctors had already told her grandmother there was nothing more they could do, that the rare congenital heart condition should have been caught years earlier, could have been treated, if only someone had paid attention, but no one had paid attention to Amara for a very long time. The nurse unfolded the letter with trembling hands to find a small red crayon heart at the top, and below it, in blue pen, the words, "To the man who has everything. I don't need much. I only need you to know the truth. Please read this all the way to the end. My mama said you would understand. She said you always finish what you start." It passed from nurse to administrator to social worker, a determined young woman named Priya, who read the name at the bottom of the letter. It went very still, because the letter was addressed to Daniel Crow, founder of Crowtech, cover of Forbes and Time, the man who had built an $11 billion empire from a single idea in a college dorm room. Priya folded it carefully, put it in her pocket, and had a feeling that everything was about to change. Show less 1:30 p.m. A. Johnson had come into this world fighting, born 6 weeks early, in a crowded public hospital on the south side of Chicago, just for pounds and 2 ounces. The nurses calling her a fighter and her mother, Keisha, calling her her miracle, and fighting is what she had done every day since, even as life made it harder and harder to do so. Keisha was 23 when Amara was born, working 2 jobs, a diner in the morning and a call center in the evening, raising her daughter in a 1-bedroom apartment with yellow curtains she had sewn herself. And though life was hard, it was theirs, and Amara filled it with drawings of elephants, on notebook paper, on the backs of envelopes, on the steamed-up windows of buses, until the day Keisha got sick. The quiet, creeping kind of sick that settles into bones and blood and hope before you even realize it has taken something essential from you. Stage 3 breast cancer. Fought for 2 years through chemotherapy and exhaustion and sheer maternal will. Beaten back and then returned, faster and fiercer the second time, until Keisha died in the same hospital where Amara had been born, on a Tuesday in November, with the yellow curtains folded in a bag in the corner because she had thought to bring them. Amara went to live with her grandmother Ruth, 72 years old, arthritic hands, fierce heart, not afraid of anything except losing this last piece of her daughter. And it was Ruth who noticed first that Amara tired easily, that she was breathless on a single flight of stairs, that her lips sometimes turned faintly blue, and the doctor said congenital heart defect, and the specialist said surgery, urgent surgery, the kind that cost more money than Ruth would ever see in her lifetime. And the assistance programs said no, and the waiting list said wait, and the doctor said gently that time was not on Amara's side. It was during those weeks of desperate phone calls and rejection letters that Amara, who heard more than adults thought she did, sat down at the kitchen table, asked her grandmother one quiet question, "Grandma, who is my father?" Listened without interrupting as Ruth told her what Keisha had shared before she died, a name, a story, a secret carried for 7 years, and then nodded, picked up her pen, and began to write. Daniel Crow had not always been powerful. He had grown up middle class in Cincinnati, son of an accountant and a librarian, and he had worked for everything he had. The work ethic real, the ambition real, and only somewhere along the way had the ability to feel things, the way ordinary people felt them, become harder to access. Not impossible, just harder. And now at 41 he ran Crowtech from a glass and steel headquarters in downtown Chicago, 3rd to 2nd floor, a view of the lake from his desk, his assistant Marcus protecting his schedule with near religious devotion. After 3 years of learning that Daniel did not take unscheduled calls, did not respond to cold emails, had 17 board meetings in the next 6 weeks and a twice-delayed product launch, and a shareholder letter that needed rewriting from scratch, and did not, in short, have time for distractions, which was why Marcus was surprised when a social worker named Priya walked into their lobby on a Wednesday morning and refused to leave until someone listened to her, and why he came to Daniel's office door at 11:45 with something careful and deliberate in his voice, the way people speak when they are trying not to say too much, to report that there was a woman downstairs with a letter from a little girl in the hospital, that she said it was urgent, that she said the girl may not have much time, And when Daniel finally looked up and asked for the girl's name and Marcus said Amara Johnson, the name meant nothing to him. But the look on Marcus's face meant enough that he said, "Send her up," without another word. Priya came in still wearing her coat, sat down across from him, placed the letter on his desk, and said she needed him to read it, all of it, before he said anything, and Daniel looked at the red crayon heart at the top and the careful, round letters of a child still proud of every word she had learned to write, and he read it, and then he read it again, and when he finally set it down his hands were not entirely steady. The letter was for pages long, and in it Amara had written about everything that mattered, the yellow curtains, the elephant drawings, the way Keisha used to hum while she cooked even when she was too tired to talk, the cancer, the hospital, the morning she came home from school to find her grandmother crying in the kitchen. And then she had written about what she had learned. "My grandma told me about you. She said my mama knew you a long time ago, before I was born. When you were both in college, you were not yet famous. She said my mama loved you. She said you loved her too, but that you had to choose between her and your company. And you chose the company. She said she understood. She was not angry. She just never told you about me because she thought it would make things hard for you." A paragraph Daniel read 3 times while the room felt very small, before continuing. "I am not writing this letter because I want you to feel bad. I don't want you to feel bad. Mama said you were a good person who had to make hard choices. I write this letter because I am sick and I need help, and you are the only person who might be able to help me, and because I think if you really knew about me, you would want to know. Mama said you always finish what you start. I am the thing she started. I think maybe you would want to finish it too." And then, in the shortest paragraph of all, "I don't need money. I mean, the doctors say I do need money. But what I really want is just to meet you once. My last wish is to look at your face and see if I have your eyes. Grandma says I have your eyes. She saw your picture in a magazine. She says they are the same color. I have never seen the color of your eyes in person. I would like to, before I run out of time. Your daughter, Amara." Priya had expected skepticism, denial, a polished deflection from a man trained to manage risk, but instead she watched Daniel read the letter a 3rd time and saw something she had not expected from a billionaire. She saw grief, and when he finally spoke his voice was very quiet. "Keisha Johnson. Keisha Johnson from Northwestern, art history major." She had a laugh that he stopped, then said simply, "She was the best person I knew," and Priya said gently, "Was," and he asked if she had passed away, and Priya said 14 months ago. Cancer, and Daniel closed his eyes, and when he opened them the focused, deliberate look on his face was that of a man who had just made a decision he should have made years ago. "Take me to the hospital," he said. The drive to the hospital took 20 minutes. Daniel sitting in the back asking questions about Amara's condition, her diagnosis, her prognosis, what the surgeons had said, absorbing each answer with the focused intensity he brought to board meetings while his leg bounced and his hands clasped tightly in his lap, because he was not a businessman right now, but something rawer and less certain. And when he walked off the elevator, Ruth Johnson was waiting outside Amara's room, small, 72, white-haired, with eyes that had seen too much and forgiven most of it. And she studied him for a long, careful moment before saying, "You have her eyes. The same hazel. I thought so from the magazine, but I wasn't certain. Now I am." And Daniel stopped in front of her, tall where she was small, and yet somehow she seemed larger, and said, "Mrs. Johnson, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about Keisha." And Ruth looked at him another moment and then nodded. Not forgiveness, not yet, but the beginning of it, and told him that Keisha had never blamed him, that she had made her own choice not to tell him, that the only reason Ruth had told Amara was because Amara had asked and Amara was dying, and she thought she had the right. And Daniel said she does. She has every right, and went in and sat beside the bed for 2 hours until Amara woke up, small, so much smaller than he had expected, oxygen tube in her nose, for in her arm, a drawing of an elephant taped to the wall above her head, and when her eyes opened, they found his immediately, and they stared at each other, their eyes the identical warm clear hazel of autumn leaves held up to light. And she said, "You came," and he said, "You asked me too," and she seemed satisfied, and asked if he knew how to draw elephants, and when he said no, she said she would teach him. But first he had to stay, because some people visit and then leave, and she needed to know, was he going to leave? And he said no with a certainty he hadn't felt in years about anything. That had nothing to do with revenue projections or market share. 2 days later, his team of specialists had reviewed her case, complex but achievable. The lead pediatric cardiac surgeon flown in from Boston Children's Hospital confirming she would perform it herself, 40 similar procedures. One of the highest success rates in the country, but it was during the preoperative blood work that the second revelation arrived. A genetic test coming back with results the doctor delivered to Daniel quietly. In a small conference room with the door closed, the paternity is confirmed. Biologically, she's your daughter. And Daniel nodded because he had already known this the way he knew the most important things. Not from data, but from the moment Amara's eyes had found his. And the whole world had quietly rearranged itself. And he asked only, what do we need to do to make her better? And the doctor said, sign the consent forms and pray a little. She's strong, but she'll need everything working in her favor. The surgery was scheduled for the following Monday. But in the days leading up to it, something else happened. Something Daniel had not anticipated. As a journalist called Marcus, then Damore, someone at the hospital having talked not maliciously, but simply the way people talk, when something extraordinary is happening and they are not sure who knows what. And within 48 hours, the story was circulating in fragments on social media. Billionaire Daniel Crow at Chicago Children's Hospital, sick little girl, mystery connection. His PR team was ready with a carefully worded statement that said everything and nothing, and protected everyone who needed protecting. And Daniel read it and set it aside and said, I'm going to do a press conference. And when his communications director Leslie stared at him, he said, I know what it is. I know what it risks. I'm going to do it anyway. The press conference was held in the lobby of Crotech headquarters on a Thursday afternoon. 40 journalists, cameras from 6 television stations. Daniel at the podium without notes, and he told them everything about Keisha Johnson, with Ruth's permission and great care for her memory, about their brief time together during his junior year of college, about parting when he chose to drop out and pursue his startup, about never knowing she was pregnant, about learning 3 weeks ago that he had a daughter from a letter written by a 7-year-old girl who had drawn a heart in red crayon at the top because she wanted him to know she was not angry, and his voice broke at that part, and he did not apologize for it. And he told them Amara was having surgery in for days, and that she was remarkable, and had taught him more in one conversation about elephants than a year of executive leadership training. And then he said the part Leslie had not expected. I have been thinking about how many other children there are like Amara, children who are sick and whose families cannot afford treatment, children who fall through the gaps in a system that was designed to catch them, but is too overwhelmed to always do it. And I've been thinking about how many of those children might have written a letter like hers. If they had known who to send it to, I'm going to do something about that. I'll share the details in the coming weeks, but I wanted to say it publicly today so that I am accountable to it. And then he stepped back from the podium and did not take questions. While across the city in a hospital room, Ruth Johnson watched his face on a small television. Above Amara's sleeping bed, the steadiness of it, the effort behind the steadiness, and thought about Keisha and choices and consequences, and the long winding ways that truth eventually finds its way to where it needs to be. And then she turned off the television and held her granddaughter's hand. Amara's surgery lasted 9 hours, Daniel sitting in the waiting room for all of it, not in a private suite, but in the same plastic chairs and fluorescent light as everyone else. Ruth beside him, the two of them not talking much, drinking terrible coffee from a hallway machine, and waiting until at 11:47 in the evening the surgeon came out and said Amara was going to be fine. And Ruth made a sound Daniel had never heard before. Grief and relief and gratitude all tangled into one, and covered her face with both hands. And Daniel sat very still for a moment and then put his hand on Ruth's shoulder, and she led him. And it was the beginning. In the months that followed, the world watched something unusual happen. Daniel Crow, who had always been discussed in terms of valuations and acquisitions and disruption, becoming known for something else entirely, the Keisha Johnson Foundation, named for Amara's mother with Ruth's blessing, $50 million endowed toward emergency medical care for children from low-income families with complex conditions. Experts and advocates and doctors brought in who had spent years navigating the same broken systems that had nearly claimed Amara's life, and Daniel listening to all of them, and quietly, without announcement, the legal process of formally acknowledging Amara as his daughter, which was not complicated legally, but took time in the human way, building trust, showing up consistently, learning what an elephant's trunk looked like from the inside of a crayon drawing, learning to draw one himself slowly and imperfectly on a Saturday afternoon while Amara laughed and corrected him. Amara left the hospital 6 weeks after surgery and came home to Ruth's apartment, the one with the yellow curtains, but now with a new room Daniel had painted soft green at Amara's request, slightly uneven at the corners, which Amara declared perfect, with a bookshelf full of animal books and a proper drawing table, and a window looking out over the street. In the spring, Daniel gave a commencement address, different from all his polished talks about entrepreneurship and innovation, speaking about a girl who had taken the biggest risk of all, the risk of asking for what she truly needed from someone who might have turned her away. She wrote that letter not knowing if I would come, not knowing if I was the kind of person who would respond. She was 7 years old and she was dying, and she still chose to believe that the truth was worth telling. That is more courage than I have ever shown in a boardroom. I am trying to be worthy of it. While in the front row, Amara, healthy now, pink-cheeked, wearing the yellow dress Ruth had made because yellow was Keisha's color, listened with the serious evaluating expression of a child deciding whether the adult in front of her had understood the lesson correctly, and afterward told him she liked the part about being worthy, and then took his hand, not because she was told to, not for the cameras, but because she felt like it, and they walked out into the spring afternoon together, while Ruth followed a few steps behind, thinking about Keisha not with grief, but with something softer, with pride, knowing that Keisha had made her choices out of love and not bitterness, and that those choices had led here, to this afternoon, to this yellow dress, to this child's hand in her father's hand, because the truth had found its way as truth eventually does, carried in a letter written in crayon and blue pen by a 7-year-old girl with hazel eyes and an elephant-shaped heart, and it had arrived.